Grace and peace to you. I want to have one last talk about stewardship today before we leave this season. And to do that, I want to talk a little bit about comic books. As you may know, I'm a big fan of comic books and I love reading them and collecting them. And one of the reasons is because they contain beautiful stories. And I think that stories are one of the most profound ways that we can find meaning in our lives and we can understand ourselves and our neighbor and our world better. And using stories is one of the ways that helps us to make sense of things. And comic books have such cool stories that are really, really good for doing exactly this. And so today specifically, I want to talk just for a minute about Spider-Man and the mantra that he kind of carries, which comes from his uncle Ben, who told Peter Parker, who's Spider-Man, that with great power comes great responsibility. You've probably heard that before, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And of course, for Spider-Man, it means that, he's got all these superpowers and he can do all these incredible things. And that comes with it a duty to use those for good, a duty to help people, right? And that Spider-Man is a high school kid who's got all these regular high school problems and he's got all these things going on. And it'd be so easy to say, you know what, I don't have time to do those things, or I don't have the energy to fight supervillains or whatever, right? But he lives by this mantra, with great power comes great responsibility, which means that because he has these things, he can't ignore them. He can't just not use them. He has to put them to use for the sake of other people. And I would argue that our Christian call is the same thing. We talk all the time about God's givingness and the grace that we find in our lives, grace and love and mercy and healing from God that we haven't deserved. It's unmerited. It's not something that we've earned. It's just something that God has given. And yet, one of my core theological understandings is that the gift of God's grace is a call to respond. That it's wonderful that God gives all these things, and yet with great power comes great responsibility. With great gifts of love and caring and mercy and healing and wholeness from God comes a responsibility to respond to that grace. And so I think the gift of God's grace is a call to respond, which doesn't mean that if we don't respond and we don't use these gifts and we don't put them into action, that doesn't mean that we don't get the gift, right? This isn't an earning thing. We don't have to do things in order that we might earn. Rather, God gives and we receive unmerited. And yet, if the gift itself is a call, then you might say, if we're not answering that call, if we're not responding to that gift, then are we even really opening it? Maybe it's like God is giving us this great gift, and yet we don't even open the package unless we respond. And by responding is how we actually open the package, is how we actually experience the gift. Because the gift isn't something that's just, we carry around in our pocket. The gift is the ministry. The gift is the response. The gift is the way that we put into action the things that we have found in God. It's the way that we care for our neighbor and make relationship with one another and invest in our world and in the lives of people around us. That's the gift. And if we're not engaging in it, and if we're not using it, if we're not living it, then it's like we're not even opening it. With great power comes great responsibility. With great gifts from God comes a call to respond to them. Not so that we can earn it, but so that we can truly and deeply and meaningfully experience it and share it with a world that so desperately wants to feel that grace. So as we end this stewardship season, I think that's our call to say, yes, God is giving, and God is giving so much. How is it that we steward this gift? How is it that we respond to this call, that the whole world might experience this grace? Remember that you are loved, and God's peace be with you.